This is Cecil here. I want to share with you guys what we got in the mail this afternoon. Make a new toy. So we've got the Hubsan X4 here. This is the 107C. We've got some Pheonix flight gear stuff here that we're going to be taking the Hubsan frame and getting rid of it, and we're going to switch over to this Pheonix flight gear 135mm carbon fiber micro H frame. Yeah, it's the 8mm version. The H10C7, 107C, I mean, and the D, which would be the FPV version. They both have the 8mm motors. If you don't have 8mm motors, I recommend getting a hold of Benedict over at Micro Motor Warehouse. He can definitely hook you up with the latest greatest 8mm motors out there. Even get you the dark editions if that's what you're after. But what we're basically going to do here is basically going to show you how to take a stock Hubsan right off the shelf, take some Pheonix flight gear stuff right off the shelf, and build a custom quad from the ground up. And we're going to be getting rid of the camera that comes in here. And by getting rid of that camera weight, we're going to be adding this camera weight. This is actually the Quantum Elite. This is a copy of the Spectrum VA 1100. Basically, it's the same thing, 4.5 grams, 5.8 gigahertz, 25 milliwatt camera and video and TX built into one. It's got a 120-degree field of view, so it should be a pretty good FPV combination. We're going to see what we can do here and get it as light as possible. So we'll be weighing everything during the build here to make sure that we or to keep track of what everything weighs. We'll be flying this quad when we're done with the BTG 500 milligram battery. Go ahead and put that in here. These are just some one cell lipos that I picked up off of eBay. They're 25C 500 milliamp. I think you get 6 of them with a small charger, and they charge up fairly quick. I've experienced charges between 35-40 minutes on the average. So without ado, let's go ahead and get ready to go ahead and disassemble everything here. And so let me move this stuff off the bench, and we'll go ahead and get this Hubsan out of the box and get it torn down. So here goes. Alright, so I already started kind of tear the Hubsan apart here, and this is a brand new Hubsan right out of the box. I did fly it around some, had some fun with it in its stock form. The Hubsan's really a great quad for indoors. So in its stock form, let's go ahead and get a weight on it real quick. Of course, this is with no props, and make sure we add those 2 screws in there. Let's go ahead and turn the scale on. So what we'll do here is let that tear out, and then we'll add these rubber feet. So 0.7 grams, 0.8 grams for the rubber feet, and the 2 screws, 0.9 grams, and the rest of the Hubsan. So I'll keep track of what we're going to do here. So let's write some of this stuff down so we can see it. So the stock Hubsan, 107C, 38.3 grams, no battery. So we'll keep track of that. Alright, so we're going to bring in our soldering station. Helping hands, I guess we want to call them. And we'll go ahead and get these guys lined up. Let's go ahead and grab a hold of this Hubsan. I'm going to have to be able to get in right here, so you always kind of position so that I keep my iron away from things. You'll see here in a second that I actually use an iron. I actually use a butane or a propane or butane torch iron. So what I'm going to do is, I don't need this camera, so we're going to go ahead and take it off the board just like that. Just snip snip, and then we can go ahead and get a weight on that compared to our other camera here in a little bit. So let's go ahead and take this other arm over here and grab a hold of this guy, so good and firmly. You're going to want to disconnect these motors, so you're going to remember what you do here, right? So motor 2, motor 1, motor 3, and motor 4. So let's go ahead and draw us a diagram. We've got 2, 4, 3, and 1. So this is blue and red, black and white, blue and red, black and white. Our battery connections, plus and minus, to our connector. And then we have our LEDs. Haven't decided whether or not I'm going to be using them. I'm going to leave them attached to the board, and I guess maybe wrap them around the arms on the flake gear quad. We'll see what happens. They don't weigh nothing, so and they actually kind of add a cool effect, so I like them. So what we'll do here is this way we can keep track of what we've got, and if you look really closer on the board, you can actually see the pluses and the minuses. So I'm going to make a note here that the white is plus, and that if you look down here on motor 2, you can actually see the plus is going to be your red. And then the same thing here, we're going to have plus on red and plus on the white. So that means they're going to be our black and our blues are all going to be our negative wires. Real simple, keeps a track of it, and this is just a piece of Adam's foam board, you know, the flight test stuff. So let's go ahead and we need to get these motors out of here, and the only way to do that is to pull them out from the front, and you can't do that unless you actually desolder them. Now I could cut them and resolder them and put some shrink, but I think that just defeats the purpose here. That's resoldering this connection, tinning 4 wires, when all I have to do is unsolder these 8 spots, and then we can remove the 4 wires and go from there. Of course, I've never done this, so we'll learn together as we go. So without ado, like I said, I use a butane torch. They're pretty handy. Sometimes they're a pain in the ass to light, so a lot of times you might have to pull the tip out, light the torch, shove it in there. Don't burn yourself. I don't recommend you do that unless you have used a butane torch for a very long time, like I have. A little bit of flux helps. I think that it just makes solder flow so much better. So don't really need a whole lot in this situation. There's probably some on my brush, so I'm just going to dab these areas just to get some flux in there where I'm going to be at. And just a dab here. You can hear that torch. So that's what we'll do. And a lot of times what I like to do is clean. I like to add a little bit of my own solder. A lot of times that'll help pull it off. So what I'm going to do here is pull off one little motor connector at a time. Real delicate here. Not to touch for too long. So that's one down. We'll move on to the next one. If you do use a butane torch, there's an exhaust port, so you never want that pointed towards anything that it could burn. So you always want to make sure that's always located in a forward direction. So as you can see, I'm just barely touching. So it'd be better if I rotate this guy around to get to the other side, just because of my torch. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and grab a hold of this guy again. same thing here. Touch right there. And that's how you do that. Butane torch makes life a lot simpler. For me it does. It gets hot really quick. And one of these days maybe I'll actually buy me a temperature controlled nice soldering station. Anyway, until then I'm going to continue using my little torch. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull these last couple of screws on this flight controller. And we will remove the flight controller. So, the last couple of screws. And all these LEDs out of the spot. So, whoa, throw it down there, why don't you, Cecil? So, alright, so there we got our 2 screws from our flight controller. We've got our flight controller removed and still connected to our LEDs. So what we'll be doing now is going ahead and reconnecting our motors here, 3, 1, and so on and so forth. Remembering that, of course, and let's draw that on our diagram, that this was forward on the copter, so we want to maintain that. And of course, all of our motors, our rotation goes inward on the Hubsans. So that's the way our props turn. They all turned in towards the body. So now that we've pretty much got the Hubsan disassembled, we can go ahead and pull our motors from here. If you're ever missing a screw, can't find it, remember the magnets on these motors are pretty powerful and they'll pick a screw up, so always check on your motors. So I guess something here to go ahead and push into the back. So I guess what we'll do is we'll be really careful and make sure we don't push on any wires, of course, and make sure that I'm on the metal casing, and you can see that from this side. So maybe a firm push, and there you have it. Then once you have enough that you can grab by your hand, I recommend you grab it and give it a little twist, and they'll work their way out. Make sure you can feed that wire through there. And we're going to keep track of where these motors were connected. This was upside down, so I'm just going to kind of lay these guys down. It doesn't really matter that they go back in the same position. As long as you follow your diagram here, you should be good. So we'll do the same thing again right there on that back side. Gives you a little bit of room to actually get something in. This is just a 440. Be careful, you don't want to strip your wires or pull them out of the back of your motor. There's a magnet I was telling you about. They stick together really good. So same thing here. I'll just go ahead and push our motor down and out. Give it a little twist. And voila, 3 down and 1 to go. And I know this is a terrible shame to buy this Hubsan and tear it down, but we're definitely going to make it a better machine than it was before. So that being said, we've got our motors. Let's weigh some stuff. Let's see what this stuff weighs, and so we can add up what we got over here. So we've got the stock camera. Let's bring that forward. So we'll go ahead and tear us out, and we're going to weigh the stock camera. Stock camera 3.2 with the wires. So we'll go to the cam. .2 grams. So we're going to take that out. Frame. Everything that it would have flown with would have been these rubbers, and don't forget all these screws. And they're all metal, so they have some weight to them as well. So with the rubber bumpers, whoops, sorry, the screws, so we got case with screws and feet. guess we'll call them feet. Sorry, 12.9 grams. Oh, it says 12.8. We're going to go with 12.9. All right, so let's go ahead and get rid of those pieces to our Hubsan. So what we'll do is I'll take this bag that the Pheonix flight gear stuff came in, and we'll go ahead and just put that frame right in there so we can stock it up. And if we ever want to go back to stock or buy another flight controller and turn this back into a Hubsan, because like I said, they are fun in their stock form, do not get me wrong. I'm by far no means a good quad pilot. I try hard, spend a lot of time on the simulator, and I'm having fun. So what we'll do here now is we'll take our flight controller, and we've got our motors. One of our screws is stuck to the motors. Like I said, those magnets are very powerful. And we'll go ahead and put our camera, and I think we have another small bag that actually that top plate came in. I'm going to put that camera in and fold that up and actually put that in this bag as well. That way we have our stock Hubsan frame and our camera all in one bag. 23.1. That's clearly a lot more. The bags weigh something. So, all right, there we go. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. Oh, well, I'm sorry about that. Let's turn this back on. Let's go ahead and find out what these guys weigh. So, motors. 19.2 grams. All right, and 4.6, okay, 4.8, say, grams each, right? Because what's 19.2 divided by 4? Now 4 goes into 25, so it's going to be just shy of 5. So there you go, 4.8, 4.7 on the average, okay? So then the flight controller, well, let's make sure these guys are getting weights, so we make sure they're over the, and FC with LED, and battery connector, 2.9 grams. All right, so now we know basically the stock Hubsan and every piece on it, basically what it weighs. And so what our objective here with our new one is to add FPV, add a custom frame, open this stock Hubsan up to 135 millimeters, and we're going to do that by using the Pheonix flight gear. Alright, this is our Pheonix flight gear. This is the carbon fiber micro H frame, 8mm version. So when they talk about 8mm, 7mm, 6mm, if you're not familiar with quads and mini quads or all this stuff, or micro quads, they're talking about the size of the hole right here in the grommet that they're going to send you. And they're talking about the diameter, which is the actual distance from here to here of the motors. And the motors are designed to fit in these grommets like so, and then these grommets are designed to be fit into these arms, all 4 places. So that's what they mean. So remember, if you've got the Hubsan X4 with the camera or FPV, you've got a C or D model, and they come with 8mm motors. The L, I believe, comes with 7mm motors. I've never personally owned an L, but that's what my research has told me. This is Pheonix Flight Gear's 135mm micro H top plate. And basically this plate will go right here on top. And they provide you with a couple of nylon standoffs with 4 nuts on here. And the standoff in here is a little shorter than the standoff that we want to use. And the reason being is we're going to be adding FPV to this frame. And by doing that, so I've got my own standoff collection here. I recommend anybody getting a set of these. I've got them both in black and white, and I've got several different sizes here with nuts, and of course we've got some screws in here as well, just like they do, that they've sent us here. So what we're going to do is basically we're going to use a little taller standoff, and the reason for that is I'm looking for a little bit more height because we're going to try to fit our new FPV camera in here. And the FPV camera we've chosen is this Quantum Elite TX camera combo microcam VTX. It's 4.5 grams. Let's go ahead and just pop it right out of here, and I'll show you what it looks like. It's a lot like the Spectrum VA 1100. It's actually probably the same factory. So let's unwind this, and this camera is actually going to be fit between these two frames. So the objective or the plan here is to get this between these two frames, and we need a standoff that's basically the same height so that we can kind of sandwich down on this guy. So I was looking through what I have available here, and the options are either using this standoff here so that we can actually get some tension on it, so squeeze it down to hold it in place, or we use one of my longer extensions and we actually cut them down so that they will fit. So the threads go pretty far in here. I'd say you probably get about 1/8 of an inch, to go ahead and chop off before you run out of ample thread. I don't know if a lot of these are threaded all the way through or not. I know these are not. So the ones that they sent here look like they may be threaded all the way through. I can't, yes, they are. There's a hole. I don't know if you guys can see that through there, but there's a hole. So, which I might end up using those, and maybe some longer screws with a nut maybe on each end. Maybe we can get to the exact height we need that way. So with a combination of the standoffs here, that's the objective, is to get this guy right in the middle and get this frame set right here on top. Now, because this antenna is not removable, what I've been looking at is, because the antenna is kind of off to the right here, I was thinking about maybe cutting a slot in this carbon fiber. Looks like it wouldn't have to be no thicker than, the saw blade, the thickness of this PCB board that they're actually using here, and actually could slide that in, and then I could actually maybe put some hot glue around that, and that might actually give us a little more support for this PCB. The connections, of course, are running up this PCB, so if this PCB breaks off, then this camera is pretty much useless after that point. I mean, you may be able to etch into the copper, the tracings on here, and actually solder on a new, maybe some wires to get to a new antenna. But this is going to be pretty rough. I hope it doesn't break off. That's probably maybe something that we can do to protect that, maybe a roll bar or something. I don't know. We'll look at that further after we get the FPV going. But let's go ahead and first things first, just like I would with any bigger quad, I'm going to go ahead and prep this carbon. Of course, this isn't laminated. This is what they call that 3000 weave. So it's just a single sheet, just one layer of woven carbon fiber that's been impermeated with, permeated with epoxy or resin or whatever it is that they're using to harden the carbon fiber. So this one's got a really nice sheen on it from the guys over at PFG, or Pheonix Flight Gear. So the way I like to finish this carbon is just you can see I've used this one in the past, just an emery board, steal one from your wife, and then of course this is carbon, so I would recommend wearing some gloves, and we're going to put down a towel here, and we're going to finish up the edges of this carbon to get it a little more manageable in our hands, so it's not as rough as it is before here. It doesn't have a tendency to chip maybe in a crash, and I haven't decided yet whether or not I'm going to, because I know I said this is not laminated, but it is layer and layer and layer on top of each other, so there are multiple layers here. So I could be completely wrong. Maybe this is an actual laminate layers. But from what I understand, it should be just one 3,000 woven. Now, it doesn't. I don't know if that means that's 3 sheets of 1,000 on top of each other. I'm not a carbon fiber expert, but what I do know is that I want to sand these edges down, and we're going to be working on all these edges. We'll do the best we can in some of these smaller areas because, of course, this isn't going to really get into those small spots. But I've got some 150 grit, maybe 200 grit sandpaper that you could use, maybe some small pieces if you were really that particular about getting everything really smoothed out. So what we'll do is we'll move this stuff out of the way and go ahead and put on the gloves here. I recommend you wear gloves, and if you're doing a lot of carbon, or if you're doing a big 5-inch or a 6-inch frame, definitely recommend that you want to get you definitely want to get some a mask and maybe do this outside. So what I do for these small guys, I'm working just right here on the bench. I'm going to go ahead and bring in a towel.
Hello, I'm Dr. Red Sphincter, Director of Anal Emissions at the Joe Schwartz Memorial Hospital. These gaseous emissions, also known as farts, poots, rippers, SBDs, cutting the cheese, or cracking the rat, can result in odors of a sulfurous nature, skid marks, social exclusions, and a warm, wet feeling in the undergarments. If you believe you are suffering from flatulence, please feel free to contact us.
This message has been brought to you by the doctors at the Joe Schwartz Hospital. Excuse me.
And I'm going to bring in a bowl of water here. It's always good to dip this in the water. It kind of keeps the carbon dust down. So basically all we're going to do is, just like if you're filing your nails, now don't scratch across the surface. You don't want to mess that up. You just want to get it at a good angle just to take that edge off, just like if you're filing your nails. So we're basically, that's what we're going to do. So, and then I'm going to rinse that off just to keep that carbon down. You can get these guys wet. So you just keep working, and just keep working yourself all the way around until you have all of the edges nice and smooth the way that you want them. All right, I'm going to keep working here. And, so I've got some sandpaper here. So what we'll do is we'll just roll it up. Make us a smaller version.
Our hidden cameras caught Mrs. Helen Grouse of Columbus, Ohio, in the act of shoplifting at an A&P store. We asked other shoppers if they'd be deterred from shoplifting if we punished Mrs. Grouse by killing her. Let's listen.
Excuse me, ma'am. Have you ever shoplifted?
Well, yes, I have.
Oh?
Yeah, on occasion I snitched a can of salmon or a jar of artichoke or something.
Well, let me ask you this.
What?
Here's a woman we just caught shoplifting.
Oh, boy.
Now, if we were to punish her by killing her, right now, would that convince you not to shoplift?
I don't know. It's kind of an impulse sort of thing, and I really doubt if you'd kill her. I mean, I'd have to say I'd probably shoplift again.
I see. Well, watch this. Now, what have we done?
Well, you just shot her in the head.
And would you say that she's dead?
Well, her whole head is blown off. Yeah, she's dead all right, yeah.
Now, let me ask you again. Do you think we've convinced you not to shoplift?
Well, I have to say I'd never shoplift again.
Why do you say that?
Well, you just proved to me that you'd kill someone if they shoplifted. I saw it with my own eyes.
You're not just saying that.
No, I'm really convinced.
You won't change your mind?
Nope, I'll never shoplift again.
At A&P, we won't stop trying until we make you say...
So what we've got here is our top plate and our bottom plate. And we've got them all finished up now. So our next step is going to be, let's go ahead and get our flight controller installed here. So what I think we're going to do is we're going to be cutting a slot in here for our camera to slide into. So I'll show you guys how I lined this out. Here's our new camera. Let's go ahead and pull it out of here again. So what I was thinking was pretty much in this area here. I'm going to be using I think I was actually considering if I put the camera off a little bit to the edge, I may actually be able to move this so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. These are the standoffs that I'm talking about using. Thinking about maybe getting a standoff in right next to the camera. And by doing that, I'll actually keep the lens inside. And with the arms out in the front here, they actually, you know, if something was to hit, it would actually have to be like right in here. And then by keeping it back in here, it's actually protected a little bit anyway. So, with that being said, I think what we want to do is line this up like that. So what we can do is just go ahead and let's do some test fitting here. So what I'll do is throw a screw in. We'll just go ahead and put a screw in from this back side on one of these guys real quick. And I'll just get this guy started. I don't know if the screwdriver will be big enough to turn. It will be. Okay. So then what we got is a nut up here just to hold it for now. And I'll probably turn this over so that we can actually have the studded part on the bottom. So basically this will be our quad spot, and we can bring our plate over so they're lined up just on top of each other. So then I guess the objective is to get this guy in between the two of them, and then how far over would she actually have to be. So let me loosen it up just enough to get my camera in there. Let's get that wire off of there. So I'm actually liking that, so I'm going to mark that, and I'm going to take my screwdriver and just put a little etch on there. And now I've actually etched a little mark onto it. So let me go outside. So let me go and cut this slot, and then we will return with a slot for our camera to go through. So we'll be right back. Alright guys, here she is. So what I've done here, you can tell this is I've mocked it up. I have not extended my wires yet to where they need to go, but they will be. I'm still getting some ideas as I'm looking at my mock-up, but as you can tell, that camera with that slot, I'll point to it here, the slot here, it ended up working out really nicely. There is a little bowing here that I'm not too happy about. I mean, I can kind of push it down. I'm actually considering removing this black case around the camera, even though I think it'll actually help protect it. So in the case of a crash, the camera is not being secured on this back side here, but I think I can resolve that by maybe adding a screw right here. It won't be screwed into anything, but it will actually stop the camera from going backwards. So I guess the idea is maybe if I take a screw and wedge it in right here, maybe a dot, some thin CA will actually help stop that camera from going back and having a tendency maybe to break that antenna off. So now that the antenna is on there, basically this guy is ready to go. This is in flight form. So this is what it would look like if it was ready to fly. So let's see if I can kind of tighten that screw up, and maybe it'll just stand there on its own. I think it will. So let's go ahead and get a weight. Remember that our stock Hubsan without the battery, and no FPV capabilities, no antenna, none of that. Head was 38.3. So we'll go ahead and take this little machine here and turn our scale and take our quad now that we're at 0, and we'll go ahead and place them on there. Should fit pretty much on there. 42 grams. $42 grams. It's not bad. It's only 3.7 grams heavier than stock. And I think maybe if I remove the LEDs, I added this battery strap, doesn't weigh anything. It actually fits the battery really nicely in here. Move this now that we know what it weighs. Or actually, let's go ahead and tear that out and let's see what our overall weight is and how she balances. I got it so that you can push this battery all the way back. Just finger tight is plenty enough. As you can tell, it's super light. And then we'll do a little balance test here. This is about the middle of the quad. So as you can see, the quad balances really nicely. The up overall weight with a 500 milliamp battery. I'll turn this around so that you gentlemen can see it. You ladies and gentlemen can see it. We got up overall weight of 54.1. So we still need to connect our wires to the board. And we also need to add a piece of heat shrink around the flight controller after that's done. I'm actually considering taking all the LEDs, since there's really no purpose to see them when you're flying FPV, and move them to the back here, maybe into a square pattern, maybe the two, one blue on the top, one blue on the bottom, or one red and one red. They may look like a purple light actually as she's flying away from you. So So next thing I'm going to do is let me flip her over here. So the next thing we'll be doing is we'll be making these connections from each one of extending these leads to get to our flight controller. Taking the flight controller, go ahead and put in heat shrink. I think, like I said, I'm going to move all 4 of the LEDs to the rear as one light in the rear, all 4 of them. And we'll see how she flies after that. Until then, I'll be back with some more. Thanks again. This is Cecil signing off. Alright guys, Cecil here. Well, unfortunately, this guy completely assembled and ready to rock is not going to cut it. Go ahead and show you the up overall weight here. That's too heavy. Alright, Cecil back here, guys. And unfortunately, I've got some disappointing news. With this assembled, and I've got some shots I'll go ahead and put in the video. With this guy completely assembled how I intended, with all these pieces here that you see not on here, the up overall weight on the quad was 46 grams. You throw on that 12.3 gram 500 milliamp battery, and it would hover, it would move around, but flight characteristics were completely shot to shit. It was a big sluggish turd. It's like flying an elephant. So yeah, didn't work. So what we're trying to do here is, and I knew this from the beginning on this project, that it was going to be an issue of weight. So what I've done here, as you can see, is I've removed the top plate, all the standoffs and the two nuts that I was using. I went ahead and stripped the camera of this case. Believe it or not, it's actually almost a whole gram, 0.8 of a gram for the case of the camera. So it actually drops that camera down to 4.2 grams. So it's actually lighter than it is advertised, but if you weigh the lens cap, it's actually that 0.2 or 0.3 grams to get this back to 4.5 as the advertised weight. If you look here on the side of the box, you'll actually see that it advertises the micro size and only 4.5 grams. I don't know if you guys can actually see that in the video, but there's a little closer shot of it. But anyway, so we've got it down to actually 4.2 grams without the lens cap, which would be a ready to fly, if you will, weight. So with no FPV and no top plate, no standoffs, that's what I want to go ahead and weigh now for us. Remember, we're trying to get back to this 38.3, and I know this is all upside down for you, and eventually at the end of the video I'll flip this upside down and we'll go over a whole review of everything and whether we were successful or not. So we've got some other options we can actually do after this. So the overall weight right now with the FPV is 39 grams. So we're actually only 0.7 grams heavier than stock, so which is pretty good. The stock battery only weighs 10.3, so if we were to add that, overall weight would be 49.3 grams with the battery, which we were sitting at almost 46 with everything that you see up here sitting on the quad. Now of course I could try to cut this wiring harness down so that I could use this cute little connector and everything, but what I think I'm going to do is just end up making a cut right here and placing this right on the Hubsan board so that it can go ahead and pull 3.7 volts from the battery. This camera is rated at, I think it says in the documentation, it's rated from 2.5 to 5 volts. So we're good with a one-cell LiPo. It's actually designed to work off of a one-cell LiPo. So there's some other things we could do here to actually drop the weight down and maybe get this back to a stock weight. Is we could remove the rubber motor isolators here and actually just maybe put a couple pieces of Scotch tape around the motors to build them up so that they'll fit in the carbon fiber frame tight enough to fly with, and that may actually reduce the weight. I'm not sure what those guys weigh. I did not weigh them ahead of time. So the other thing here is we could remove all the LEDs. You'll see in the previous shot that I had all the LEDs kind of just wrapped around that rear standoff, and they kind of were sticking, all four of them are sticking out in the rear, and it kind of looked like a great, little tail light, like almost like a larger racing quad. But anyway, so we removed all these parts and we've got the weight down to 39 grams, ready to fly without the battery. So with a stock battery, this actually will only be roughly, about half a gram heavier than it would be stock. So I think a half of a gram payload on most other Hubsans. I've seen Hubsans online that have flown around with the Spectrum BA1100s on them that have been wired into them, and they seem to fly sluggish, but at least they fly, and this didn't fly at all. I had a tendency for this to, once it would lift off the ground, it wanted to yaw, but it only so much and then it would stop. So I don't know if there's a calibration issue with the way the board is calibrating itself because of how it's fastened. It's just, I stuck a piece of one-sided foam underneath the flight controller and just fastened it down with one small zip tie. So it's just sandwiched between there. I used this small battery strap here. This battery strap is just as light as a rubber band, if not lighter. It doesn't really weigh anything, but it holds the battery really secure. I'll go ahead and bring one in here and show you. So that's what we're doing, is we're just be able to strap this down and you can actually just squeeze hard enough with your finger to where that battery will not move. So she's ready to go as is right here. We could just let me wiggle around these LEDs and try to keep them somewhere here in the rear, and then we could plug this guy in, show you guys that it does indeed all work and all the lights come on and all that good jazz. So there she is. So let's go ahead with the battery. We'll go ahead and turn this guy back on and get a weight ready to fly for you. So with no FPV right now with a battery, we're at 47, it looks like. Make sure we're covering 46.9 grams. So 46.9 grams ready to fly. So I say I'm going to do a test flight like this, see what the quad acts like, see if I can get it to initialize and calibrate really level flight, a good hover. I have yet to experience that. On the other one, of course, it flew like a turd. Like I said, it came up and wanted to yaw a little bit, but didn't stop, which didn't make a lot of sense. It's not like the trim was out and it just continually started, kept yawing. So I had to hold a little bit of yaw to keep it heads away from me, and or heads up, I guess, if you want to call it. And then it wanted to drift back and to the right. So I had to hold a little bit of roll and a little bit of pitch just to keep it right in front of me. So hopefully we're going to do a test flight like this. Upper overall weight 47 grams. Is that what it says now? So I think the best we got was a 47. So we'll call it 46.9, 47 grams. So let's run a test flight and then I'll get back to you. Alright guys, so at 46.9 grams with a 500 milliamp battery, this Hubsan stripped down and put on the Pheonix flight gear, 135 millimeter micro H frame. It flies really nimble. It's super light, jumps around a lot. It required some trim on my part, and of course it doesn't really sit flat, so sometimes these props can be a real booger trying to get off these motors. Sometimes it just doesn't want to go up underneath there. Alright, so it flies pretty good. It's super nimble, so I'm looking forward to getting the FPV put in there and get it running. We're going to be doing a little bit of research, and I'm sure maybe somebody out there in YouTube land already knows this question, knows the answer to this question. So what I'm looking for is basically on this board. I know maybe you guys can't see this, but maybe you can. If you look on the back here where there's some more connections on this board, there's this RTC. I'm going to do a little research and see if I can figure out what that RTC is. I'm going to also stick a voltmeter on it real quick, and while it's got a battery attached to it, and find out if I'm pulling the battery voltage from that spot. I'm going to take this small piece of foam that I've got cut here, maybe at a 25 to 30 degree angle. I like a lot of angle. I like to stay forward a lot of the times when I'm flying, and we're going to actually just place this on here. And I've actually cut that down a little bit. That might be just too steep of an angle for me. I think by putting it on there loosely might be the best bet, but that is yet to be seen. So we'll go ahead and start making some of these changes. I'm going to be removing the flight controller once again from here, and I'm going to solder in the power wires for this guy. Maybe I'll leave it there. I was considering actually removing the LEDs, but I think I'm going to leave the LEDs in the rear here, and I think I might actually place them so that there may be two of them facing down and two of them facing up. We have the two blues in the front that you can actually help with orientation if I'm flying the Hubsan in the past. So I'm going to go ahead and do those changes, and then I'll be back with you guys. Alright, so I've gone ahead and covered up, not covered up, but I went ahead and secured these wires, the motor wires down here. I don't know if you guys, how good you can see that, but I went ahead and used some of the fishing line that they include with the kit from Flight Gear, Pheonix Flight Gear, and I'm going to show you how I do it. So they send you a one long piece of fishing string, more than ample enough to do whatever it is you need. I like to pull off about 6 or 8 inches. Of course, the longer the piece, the easier it is to work with. So if you're new to tying fishing line, or if you've never tied a hook onto a fishing line, working with fishing line's a little tricky, but if you longer the piece, the easier it is. Some of you pros out there, fly fishermen, people have been tying knots for a long time. This is just going to be 2 simple overhand knots, nothing fancy. I like the overhand knot because you can tie the first one, not worry about it getting tight, and then as you tie that second one, that's really when you can, it'll tighten up both knots, or until you get to a point where you need to be. And this doesn't have to be super tight. Remember what we're dealing with here. One thing about working on this flight test foam board is you can stick the shafts of the quad down in there and it kind of holds that guy for you. It makes it kind of easier to keep it in place, and I just kind of pull them tight until I like what's there. A lot of times it might help to bite one end, pull, so that gets it super tight, and then I'll go ahead and just right up above the knot, close as I can, snip off the excess fishing string. Super clean from the top. You can just barely see those 8 little lines across there. Super clean, and of course it added no weight to the quad itself, but it secured those wires really well to the bottom of the frame. So we'll go ahead and I think we're going to apply some fishing string maybe here and here to keep these wires down, since we've got them crossed like this. And you don't have to cross yours like the way that I did. I did that so that it was a lot cleaner than coming right around this edge right here, and I still could have done that same thing. And to be honest with you, because this is actually upside down, so when I wired it in, I actually had my motors placed like this with the quad facing up. So a note to be made here, and I should probably put this, is this is upside down. Like I said, at the end of this, I'll be wrapping all this up and turn this board around so you guys will be able to give a good look at this and push pause if you need to write any of this stuff down. Or if you're building your own project and you don't have a scale, I've pretty much weighed out a lot of the stock pieces that I've used here individually, so that you could actually go through and mix and match the pieces that you want and try to come up with an idea of your overall weight and what it's going to be. I definitely think I'm going to be upgrading this guy with some Dark Edition 18-18 motors. This is definitely, this quad with the FPV is definitely going to need that extra punch. Not that it will be a racer per se, but it's definitely going to need that extra punch to get you in and out and where you need to go and where you want to go, and to carry the extra gear around. We're going to go ahead and attach our camera, like I said, and we'll probably just go ahead and cut that wire right there, get rid of all this excess clip, and save that with our other wiring harness piece to keep this guy as light as possible. And then we're going to figure out something to do with these LEDs. I might just put a thin drop of CA on the back here and just cram them all down in the back. Maybe throw one big piece of heat shrink over the top and put them all together into one set, and have them all just sticking out the back at a little line, maybe blue, red, and maybe it'll give a purple hue as it flies away. Who knows? Alright guys, so I'm going to go ahead and make the rest of my changes, go ahead and attach my FPV gear, and go for another test flight. So we'll be back when that's ready to go. Okay guys, so I went ahead and removed that zip tie, and I wanted to show you guys, if anybody was wondering. I wrapped those wires around there, and as you can see now they're actually on the side that they're on, even though they're twisted. Now I needed that because I wanted enough room for one to be able to move the wires around. This is some real delicate soldering in here, and I don't have the best of eyes anymore, so even with my magnifying glasses on I can hardly see what I need to do. So anyhow, so then I just twist that board and be able to flip that over, and like I showed you, I put a small piece of foam here. You guys can see this. this piece of foam here. And it actually just rests right down there and keeps this guy kind of flat and stable. So what I think we're going to do is we're going to, like I said, I'm going to get this battery connection kind of out of the way, and I wish I could come up with some mechanical kind of fastener that I could fasten that wire so that it wasn't so delicately and maybe be ripped off of there. And that's another reason I use a butane soldering iron, is I take my soldering iron with me. And I know there's some 12-volt options out there that you can actually plug into, you know, say a 3S Lipo and have them on site, and I've considered doing that, but I've gotten really used to the butane torch, and that's just another positive for me, is that you can use it in the field. It's ready to go in a matter of seconds, and you're ready to go with any repair that you may have because of a crash. And believe me, you are going to crash. There's a lot of crashing going on here, so we'll go ahead and find out what we need to do. Looks like just me wiggling it around over here, I went ahead and lost one of my motor connections for my soldering job here, and it's just so small. These soldering pads are so tiny, so we'll go ahead and retin that and get it reconnected. And looks like everything else is going to stay connected. I think that's just from that series of twisting that I was doing, back and forth, back and forth. It's not made to be twisted back and forth, but we'll get this one reconnected here, not a big deal, and we'll get this these two wires connected to where they need to go. Actually, it's going to be in the front. This is the front of the quad here, and we'll get the camera on there. Alright guys, Cecil here again. We finally got it. So as you can see, we had to strip a lot of things off of there from the original plan. The original plan was to use the top plate and actually sandwich the camera between it, and that didn't work. We ended up being almost 47 grams without the battery, with all the FPV gear, the top plate, the wires, the wire harness. So as you can see here, the wire for the camera has actually been cut and wired in with the negative and the positive on the, actually the battery connections on the back of the flight controller. So the flight controller and all the wires have been secured with fishing line. I'll go ahead and turn this guy over for you so you can see the back. The antenna's still kind of touching, but I just ran the wires. I've got a couple of straps here, and the battery just kind of slides in and stops right about here. Gives you a really good center of gravity. I use the fishing line, just simple overhand knots to tie these guys up. I just added, took a toothpick, a little bit of thin CA, put a little drop of thin CA on all the knots to help hold them. I've also, like I mentioned earlier, took those LEDs and did my best here to kind of fit them into a piece of heat shrink and get them to square up along the back here, and so it acts like a really bright tail light. Works really good. I'm using this little cardboard thing here because the bottom, there's no supports, as you can see here. I didn't put anything on here to help hold it up, and the battery sits underneath, so it has a hard time being level. And one thing that's really, really important with that Hubsan flight controller is that it be completely level and flat right off the beginning, so that you can calibrate your accelerometer and get everything ready to go. It really helps the flight characteristics. Getting the CAG on here was critical. Center of gravity had to be just right for this guy to pirouette in one spot. I'm using the Hubsan Props, so super nimble. We ended up with a final build weight of just 38 grams, actually 0.3 grams lighter than the stock Hubsan with no FPV. That's including a 5.8 25 megawatt VTX, and we'll be using a 500 milliamp battery. Now with the battery, it brings it right at to 50 grams, 49.9, 50 grams. So 50 grams is great for the power that you're seeing here. I do believe, I'm not sure if these are exactly Dash 15 motors, but I know the replacement for these guys is supposed to be the Dash 15. These are 8 by 20 millimeter motors. So I think with a Dash 17s, the little faster ones than this, and then of course the Dash 18, the Dark Edition, the insane speed ones, that would probably really take this quad to the next level. Maybe with some more motors and maybe a little more thrust, you might be able to actually add back the top plate. But I would probably go with a short top plate so that you could just connect from behind the camera location here to maybe right here where the battery is. The other thing I really like is the strap's kind of hiding it here, this battery strap. So let me move this here. Is this fishing line I tied along the back is actually giving me a little more mechanical hold now on the battery wire being through there. So the battery gets janked out of here. It's just pulling on it from right here. It's not really pulling it from the board anymore, which is a plus. So there she is. She flies amazing. I'll put up some FPV video as soon as I can get a day without 10 feet of snow outside. So good luck to you guys, and until then, this is Cecil signing off. We'll see you again. Bye.